Good morning, India. Welcome to another deep dive.
Yeah.
Where we, always try to take a look at what's really going on and get past all the noise and all that.
Absolutely.
So today we're looking at Kunal Kamra.
Yes.
And the kind of firestorm that has erupted around him and his satire and comedy.
Yeah.
And we've got a bunch of different perspectives here, different articles and commentaries, kind of looking at freedom of speech and the political fallout of all this.
Right.
And I think what we'd really like to do today is help you understand what's at the core of this whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
What's the tension between criticizing and those in power? And how are people interpreting free speech differently? And what does all this mean for, people who want to speak out in India today?
Yeah. And I think a good place to start is right with our sources.
Okay.
We have this really interesting contrast right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
We have Prime Minister Modi's statement that criticism is the soul of democracy.
Right. Very famous statement.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's been kind of a cornerstone of his rhetoric.
Yeah.
But then we see the reaction to Kunal Kamra's comedy.
Yeah.
Which has been met with threats, FIRs filed against him.
Right.
It's almost like...
It's interesting how he even responds by tweeting a picture with the Constitution.
Yeah. It's almost like he's saying, well, here's the soul of democracy.
Yeah, exactly.
But how come my criticism isn't being treated as such?
Right.
So there's that tension between what's being said about the importance of criticism and then how it's actually being handled.
Yeah, and it's interesting, too, because... we're talking about Kunal Kamra's video, Naya Bharat.
Right.
And what's interesting is that it doesn't even touch religion.
That's right.
From what our commentators are saying.
Yes.
He's really targeting political figures, like specifically Eknath Shinde, without any religious references.
Yeah.
But the backlash has been so strong.
Right.
There are reports of attacks on theater property and stuff.
And this one commentator had this line that I thought was so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
In India today, chairs are more in danger than humans.
Wow. Yeah, that's really something.
And it kind of gets to the heart of what a lot of these sources are saying.
Okay.
It's not really even about whether Kamra's comedy is funny or not.
Right.
It's about the prime minister's own words about criticism.
Yeah.
And then what happens to someone who actually criticizes.
Mm-hmm.
It's like those people who believe in what he was saying are seeing that criticism being sent to God.
It's almost like this idea that criticism is this fragile thing, like a wandering soul, as this one analogy puts it, that if it's out in the open, it's going to get attacked.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes you think about, that whole incident in Mumbai.
Yeah.
And we haven't heard anything from Modi himself about it yet.
Right. It's almost like
which is interesting.
Those words about criticism are just that words.
Right.
And not necessarily a reflection of what happens in practice.
Okay, so now we're also looking at some of Kamra's past satire.
Right.
Like when he was asking why Ambani wasn't made PM.
Before the 2019 election.
Yeah, back in 2019.
Right.
Or even when Modi himself was making jokes during the 2024 elections.
About Ambani and Adani.
Yeah, linking them to black money being transported in tempos.
Right, it's kind of ironic, isn't it?
So ironic.
That politicians can make these kinds of jokes.
Yeah.
But a comedian faces serious consequences.
It makes you wonder what's allowed and what isn't.
Exactly. And then we have this whole incident at Habitat Theater.
Right.
Where these individuals were almost bragging about disrupting the show.
Yeah.
And there's an FIR against the Shiv Sena youth leader and others.
Right.
And what's interesting is that the perceived insult wasn't even to a person.
Right. It was to corporations.
Yeah, it was to corporate entities whose owners were being associated with transporting black money.
And that's exactly the kind of joke that Modi himself made.
Right. So it really highlights this inconsistency.
Yeah. It's like who gets to be offended and who doesn't.
Exactly. And, our sources point out that Ambani didn't seem bothered when his son was linked to gifting a jungle.
Right.
Or the memes after Modi's visit to Vantara.
Yeah, after the wedding.
Didn't cause this kind of uproar.
And what about that whole legal case with Adani in the U.S.?
Yeah, where the Indian government even forwarded the summons.
Right.
It's like certain types of satire are tolerated and others are met with this huge backlash.
It almost feels like some of these political activists are overreacting to Kamra's corporate jokes.
To try and get on the good side of political parties.
Yeah, think about how Eknath Shinde's supporters reacted to being called traitors.
Right, and it's particularly interesting because Shinde himself went from chief minister to deputy chief minister.
Right. It's not like he hasn't had his own political shifts.
Exactly. And we've seen this word traitor used before.
Yeah, like the NCP's student wing called Ajit Pawar a traitor with posters.
Mm-hmm. And Uddhav Thackeray has used similar rhetoric.
Right. But the reaction to Kamra was on a whole other level.
It really makes you think about the motivations behind it.
And there's this whole issue of media hypocrisy that keeps coming up.
Oh, absolutely.
We're seeing outlets that were spreading misinformation about Rhea Chakraborty.
Yeah.
Now they're the ones debating the limits of Kamra's free speech.
It's like they're suddenly concerned about where the line is.
And former Justice Muralidhar asked this really poignant question.
Yeah.
Why is it so hard to tolerate comedy?
It really gets to the heart of it.
And it's interesting because there wasn't any major action taken against those outlets in the Chakraborty case.
Right, but there's this whole campaign against Kamra now.
Right, and then there are the threats that Kamra has received.
Yeah.
I mean, a Shiv Sena MP and an MLA threatened to stop him from moving freely.
In Maharashtra and even across India.
It's kind of scary.
It's like they want to control where he can and can't go.
Right. It reminds me of what some countries do to people who leave.
But it really makes you question the state of dissent in India.
And then there are these counter-arguments that just don't make sense.
Yeah.
Like this idea of Hindu phobia being linked to a snack brand.
It's like they're trying to discredit any criticism.
Even if it's completely unrelated. Right, even if it's a stretch.
And there's that FIR against Kamra that also names Rahul Gandhi.
Yeah, accusing them of conspiring to damage Eknath Shinde's reputation.
Right.
And the potential penalties are pretty serious.
Yeah, up to 3 years in prison or a fine.
It's not something to be taken lightly.
And we have to remember what the Supreme Court said about freedom of speech.
Right.
They reprimanded the Gujarat police for not understanding it.
Even after 75 years of the Constitution.
Yeah, this was in that case with the Congress MP's poem.
Right.
And the court specifically talked about the lack of sensitivity in filing cases over creative expression.
It sets a precedent.
Yeah.
That seems to be ignored in situations like this.
Right. It's almost like when the mainstream media is seen as biased, comedians become like journalists.
In a way, yeah.
Using satire to say things that people might not hear otherwise.
Like Kamra's point about the pace of innovation in India compared to China.
Right.
That was a really interesting critique. And the reactions to that were fascinating, too. Some people were saying that China's advancements are because of their one-party system.
Like that somehow justifies things.
Right. But Kamra used the example of this struggling two-wheeler company.
That wanted to make India.
Yeah. It really highlighted that gap between ambition and reality.
Right. And I think the point is that a mature society should be able to handle satire.
Yeah.
To not get so worked up over manufactured outrage.
Especially when there are real problems.
Like economic struggles and healthcare issues.
Right. Those are the things we should be focusing on.
Absolutely. And it's significant that Kamra is getting financial support from his audience.
Yeah, that's a real show of solidarity.
It's that soul of democracy in action.
And he's gotten support from leaders like Sharad Pawar and Priyanka Chaturvedi, too.
It shows that not everyone is against him.
Right. And then you have the statement from Maharashtra Home Minister Ramdas Kadam.
About limits on free speech?
Yeah, specifically for people in constitutional posts.
Which is a strange distinction.
Yeah, where does it say that in the Constitution?
Right. And political parties themselves use satire all the time.
Against their opponents.
Yeah, so it's very selective.
It seems like it all depends on who's saying what.
And who they're targeting.
Right. So what we're seeing with Kunal Kamra is really a sign of how fragile free expression is right now.
It's scary because dissent can lead to FIR's intimidation.
Right.
And it might stop other people from speaking out.
And it all goes back to that statement from Modi about criticism.
It's like there's this huge disconnect between what he said and what's actually happening.
Yeah, it makes you wonder about the state of democratic discourse in India.
It's a crucial question to be asking.
So today we've looked at all these different perspectives on Kunal Kamra and his comedy.
And the reactions it's provoked.
And I think it really highlights the debate over free speech and criticism in India.
It's an ongoing conversation.
And we want to hear what you think about it.
Yeah.
What role do you think citizens have in creating a space for dissent?
Where people can speak their minds without fear.
It's something we should all be thinking about.
Absolutely.
So please leave your thoughts in the comments below.
Yeah.
And don't forget to like this deep dive and subscribe to our channel.
For more in-depth discussions on important topics.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for listening.